They told you how to live before you even knew who you were. From the moment you took your first steps, the world began whispering its rules: what to say, how to act, what to dream, and, more importantly, what not to. The message was clear: don't stand out too much, don't question too loudly, and whatever you do, don't be different. Because in a world addicted to sameness, being yourself is seen as rebellion. But somewhere inside you, there has always been resistance, a quiet voice that refuses to be silenced. You felt it in moments when you couldn't quite follow the crowd, when pretending felt heavier than honesty, when being accepted cost too much of your truth. That voice is the real you, the part the world tried to tame but never could. Every person is born authentic, but as we grow, society teaches us how to hide. Schools teach us how to obey. Families teach us what's acceptable. Friends teach us what's popular. And slowly, almost without noticing, we trade who we are for who they want us to be. We learn to smile when we're breaking, agree when we disagree, and conform just to feel safe. But safety and freedom can't exist in the same cage. The pressure to conform is powerful because it plays on your deepest human need, the desire to belong. You want to be seen, accepted, understood. But the world often demands a price for belonging: your individuality. It tells you that fitting in is the key to happiness, but that's a lie. Because the more you blend in, the more invisible you become. Psychologically, that's when the quiet suffering begins. When your outer life no longer matches your inner truth, the mind rebels. You feel restless, anxious, and disconnected. You can't explain why, but something always feels off. That's not weakness, that's your soul fighting back. It's trying to remind you that peace doesn't come from approval, it comes from authenticity. The world fears those who think for themselves, because independent minds can't be controlled. And that's why it tries to make you like everyone else. But deep within you lies something unbreakable, a spirit that refuses to disappear. That spirit is why you've always felt different. It's why you've never been satisfied with shallow answers or empty praise. You were meant for something higher, not comfort, but truth. Think of how many times you've silenced yourself to be accepted. How many dreams you've buried because someone called them unrealistic. How many versions of yourself you've created just to survive in places that never deserve the real you. But here's the turning point: you can stop now. You don't owe anyone the watered-down version of your soul, because the truth is, you were never meant to blend in. The very things that make you different are the proof that you're alive. The world's attempt to shape you isn't a compliment, it's fear. It fears what it can't predict, what it can't control, what it can't understand. And that's exactly what you are: unpredictable, uncontrollable, unapologetically unique. So if you've ever felt out of place, that's not your weakness. That's your power showing. You were built to stand apart, not to seek approval from a world still asleep. The ones who change everything are never the ones who blend in, they are the ones who refuse. Stay with this until the very end, because what's coming will show you something most people never learn: that the moment you stop chasing acceptance and start embracing your difference, you stop surviving and start living. When you spend too long trying to be what others want, something inside you begins to fade. At first it's small, a quiet discomfort, an uneasy feeling when you look in the mirror. You smile, but it doesn't feel real anymore. You laugh, but it's empty. That's what happens when you start trading your truth for their approval. You begin to vanish, piece by piece, until one day you can't even recognize who you've become. The world convinces you that belonging matters more than being real. You start to adjust your tone, hide your dreams, and edit yourself just to fit in. You wear a mask so often that it starts to feel like your skin, but deep down you know it's not you. You're living a life shaped by expectations, not by purpose. And the human mind can sense that betrayal. It reacts with quiet pain, stress, fatigue, confusion, and that haunting emptiness that no success or praise can fill. Psychology teaches that the greatest human suffering doesn't come from failure, it comes from self-abandonment. When you silence your emotions just to stay liked, you train your brain to believe your feelings don't matter. You build walls around your heart and call it maturity. You tell yourself, "I'm fine," while a part of you is slowly breaking. Because pretending to be someone else is the most exhausting work in the world. It drains your energy, your creativity, and your joy. And the worst part, you start to measure your worth by how others see you. If they're pleased, you feel good. If they criticize, you collapse. You become addicted to their validation, needing constant reassurance that you're enough. That dependency turns powerful souls into quiet prisoners. You start saying yes when your heart screams no. You start apologizing for simply being yourself. You stop living and start performing. But here's the truth, the cost of pretending is far too high. You lose your peace, your identity, and your direction. You wake up every morning wearing a smile that doesn't belong to you. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel unseen. Because no one can truly love you if they don't even know the real you. There comes a moment, though a silent breaking point, when the pain of hiding becomes heavier than the fear of being yourself. That's when transformation begins. That's when you realize that peace doesn't come from being accepted by everyone, but from finally accepting yourself. You weren't born to be liked by all. You were born to live in truth. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you heal a part of your soul. You reclaim the peace you gave away. And slowly, you begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That's the real freedom, not fitting in, but finally standing tall in your own truth, no matter who walks away. There comes a day when the weight of pretending becomes too heavy to carry. You wake up, look at your life, and realize that every choice you've made was designed to please someone else. That's the breaking point, the moment when your soul whispers loud enough for you to finally hear it. It's not anger that rises first, but clarity. You begin to see the pattern, how you gave up your dreams, your opinions, your spark, just to keep peace with a world that never cared to understand you. That's when something inside you shifts. You stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what do I think? It sounds simple, but that question changes everything, because once you begin to think for yourself, you can't go back. The mask no longer fits. The roles others assigned, you start to feel suffocating. You begin to crave truth, raw, unfiltered, and real. This is what psychologists call a moment of awakening, when your authentic self demands to return. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives quietly, often in the middle of pain. Maybe you've been hurt, overlooked, or betrayed, and suddenly you realize that losing people isn't the worst thing losing yourself is. You understand that no approval is worth the price of your peace. The awakening is powerful because it doesn't ask for permission. It simply shows you what's real. You start noticing how often you said yes when you meant no. How often you smiled to hide your frustration, how many dreams you postponed because someone told you they were unrealistic, and then you feel something new, not fear, but freedom. You begin to see that your difference isn't a flaw, it's evidence that you've always had your own rhythm. Once you experience this inner awakening, there's no turning back. The same environment that once felt comfortable now feels limiting. Conversations that used to excite you now feel empty. You realize you've outgrown pretending. You no longer crave validation, you crave alignment. You start choosing honesty over approval, peace over popularity, and truth over comfort. It's not easy at first. People who benefited from your silence will be the first to resist your change. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. You've stopped shrinking to fit their expectations. You've stopped betraying yourself to make others feel safe. You've started living in a way that honors who you truly are, and while that awakening may cost you certain people, it will give you back something far more valuable, your self-respect. You'll feel a deep calm within you, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to explain itself. That's the beauty of awakening. Once you find your truth, you stop chasing theirs. You begin to walk your path, not perfectly, but honestly, and that's where real strength begins. When you finally choose to live in truth, something unexpected happens. Silence. The noise of fake approval fades, and the people who once surrounded you start to drift away. At first, it feels like loss. You wonder if you made a mistake. You question whether authenticity is worth the loneliness it brings. But that silence isn't emptiness. It's space. It's the universe clearing the noise so you can finally hear yourself. Being different often means walking alone for a while. The moment you stop pretending, you realize how many of your relationships were built on who you pretended to be. When you change, they see you as unfamiliar, not because you've become worse, but because you've become real. Most people don't know how to handle real. They prefer the version of you that kept them comfortable, but that version was dying inside. This stage of isolation is not punishment, it's purification. It's where the unnecessary falls away. You begin to see who truly values your soul, not your compliance. You discover the strength that only solitude can teach, the kind of strength that doesn't come from being surrounded, but from standing firm when no one stands with you. Psychologically, this is where many give up. The human brain is wired to seek belonging. It fears separation. It craves connection. That's why walking your own path feels so unnatural at first. But this discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's proof that you're growing beyond your conditioning. The loneliness you feel is not a void, it's a doorway. You are stepping from imitation into individuality. In that solitude, something powerful begins to happen. You start listening not to others, but to your inner world. You rediscover passions you buried. You hear your own thoughts clearly, without the echo of opinions. You begin to understand that peace doesn't come from people, it comes from alignment. And once you find that inner alignment, loneliness turns into strength. People may misunderstand you. They'll say you've changed, become distant, too quiet, too intense. But that's because you've stopped entertaining superficial noise. You're no longer available for empty validation. You're learning to enjoy your own company, and that's when your energy begins to rise. That's when you stop chasing attention and start attracting respect. Being different often means standing alone in rooms where everyone thinks alike, but that's where leaders are born. That's where vision begins. Every great soul has walked through the valley of solitude before finding their light, and so will you. One day, the silence that once scared you will become your sanctuary. You'll no longer feel isolated, you'll feel chosen. Because you'll understand that being alone was never about losing people. It was about finding yourself. When you finally make peace with being alone, a quiet kind of power begins to rise inside you. It's not loud or arrogant. And that's when your true energy starts to radiate. Authenticity has a gravity of its own. It draws the right people and repels the wrong ones. It doesn't chase, it attracts. You start to notice that when you speak, your words carry more weight. When you walk into a room, you don't need attention, your presence speaks for you. That's what happens when a person lives in alignment with who they really are. The world can sense it, even if it doesn't understand it. Psychologists call this congruence, the state when your inner world matches your outer actions. It's one of the most peaceful states a human being can experience. You no longer have to remember who you pretended to be. You no longer feel drained after every conversation. You start waking up with purpose instead of pressure. You begin to move differently, not to impress, but to express. But here's the most powerful truth. Authenticity demands courage. It's not for the faint-hearted. Because when you decide to be yourself, you're not guaranteed approval, you're guaranteed truth. You'll see people's real faces. You'll discover who celebrates your honesty and who only tolerated your mask. And while that can be painful, it's liberating. You'll stop wasting your energy trying to convince people to understand you. Instead, you'll pour it into becoming who you were always meant to be. Being authentic doesn't mean being perfect. It means being real enough to own your flaws, your emotions, and your journey. You stop hiding your struggles because you realize they're part of your strength. You stop pretending to be strong all the time because vulnerability is not weakness, it's human. And strangely, when you allow yourself to be real, people respect you more. Because truth, no matter how raw, always commands respect. You begin to notice something beautiful. You no longer fear rejection. You understand that not everyone is meant to stay, and that's okay. The people who are meant for you will see your light and recognize it. They'll connect to your truth, not your mask. And that's when connection becomes real, when you no longer have to shrink or edit yourself to be loved. This is the moment your life begins to change direction. You're no longer guided by fear, but by inner clarity. You trust yourself again. And that quiet self-trust becomes your power. Because when you live in authenticity, no one can manipulate you with approval or destroy you with rejection. You stand firm not because you are perfect, but because you are finally real. The moment you start living authentically, you realize something profound. The world doesn't actually need more people who fit in. It needs more people who refuse to. The ones who think differently, feel deeply, and dare to question what everyone else accepts as truth. Because every change that has ever shaped humanity began with someone who refused to be like everyone else. History remembers the rebels, the dreamers, the ones who stood apart. They were laughed at, doubted, and criticized, yet they held on to their vision. They didn't follow the crowd because they understood that progress never comes from imitation. It comes from courage, the courage to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. That same courage exists within you. But remember, their words only have power if you give them meaning. Silence is often the strongest answer. Every time you choose not to react, you take your power back. Psychologically, this is where emotional mastery is born. Strong people don't waste energy explaining themselves to those committed to misunderstanding them. They rise above the noise, not because they're arrogant, but because they know peace is a luxury worth protecting. Your mind is your home, guard it carefully. Don't let every opinion become a guest. You'll notice that when you stop reacting, something shifts. The noise begins to fade. The same people who once questioned you start to notice your calm. They see that you no longer seek their validation, and that unsettles them even more. Because nothing confuses the world more than a person who doesn't need to prove their worth. That kind of confidence is quiet, but it commands attention. The truth is, not everyone will understand your silence. Some will misinterpret it as weakness, others as pride. But silence, when rooted in strength, is a statement. It says, I've outgrown the need to argue for my truth. You're no longer fighting to be seen, you're focused on becoming. That's the kind of strength that can't be shaken because it's built from within. Rise above the noise by remembering who you are and why you started. You didn't come this far to fall back into the crowd. You've learned too much, grown too deep, and awakened too profoundly to lose yourself again. Let your actions speak louder than your explanations. Let your peace be your protest. And while others waste their energy trying to be noticed, you'll move in silence, building something real, something that lasts. Because greatness doesn't scream, it simply shines. The world will eventually see it, but by then, you won't need their recognition. You'll already know your worth, so rise above the noise, stay still in the storm. And remember, when you no longer respond to the chaos around you, it's because you've found harmony within. There comes a moment when everything becomes clear. The loneliness, the struggle, the silence, the rejection. You finally understand that none of it was punishment. It was preparation. Every time you felt out of place, life was shaping you to stand apart. Every time you were misunderstood, it was proof that your path was never meant to look like theirs. You were never meant to blend in, because blending in would have buried your purpose. You begin to see that being different was never the problem, it was your greatest protection. The world tried to mold you into someone ordinary, but you refused. You resisted quietly, maybe even unknowingly, but that refusal kept your soul alive. Because the moment you start imitating others, your magic begins to die. The very things that made you feel like an outsider were actually the signs of your higher calling. There is a deep kind of peace that comes with finally accepting who you are. You stop trying to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You stop comparing your path to anyone else's. You realize that life isn't a competition, it's a creation. And your creation will never look like someone else's. It isn't supposed to. That's what makes it beautiful. Psychologically, this is the highest form of self-acceptance. When you stop fighting your difference, your mind stops fighting you. You begin to feel lighter, more grounded, more alive. You no longer chase validation because you finally understand that your value isn't something others can measure, it's something you carry. It's not dependent on praise, and it can't be taken by rejection. The people who once made you doubt yourself will one day see what you were building in silence. But by then, you won't need them to, because the goal was never to prove them wrong, it was to prove to yourself that you were right to believe in your own way. You'll look back and realize that every challenge taught you resilience, every loss gave you depth, and every moment of solitude revealed your strength. You were never here to follow paths already walked. You were meant to create your own. That's why you never fit in, because you were designed to stand out. You were meant to think differently, feel deeply, and live truthfully. That's what makes you rare. That's what makes you powerful. So walk your path with pride. Be bold enough to stay true, even when it's lonely. Be brave enough to keep your light shining, even when others don't understand it. Because the world doesn't need another imitation, it needs your truth. And one day, when you look back, you'll smile not because you became what they wanted, but because you stayed who you were meant to be.